It's been a while since we last checked in with the goings-on in the management of the zoo. Since reopening, following extensive renovations, thoughts have begun to turn towards the future. What comes next for the zoo, and how will it best use the remaining space within the house's grounds? The ever-enthusiastic Lord Coltham is raring to get jetting around the globe in search of new ideas and fanciful new themes. Headkeeper Luke is busy managing the implementation of the final stages of the recent change, which sees our new Himalayan area come to life. This new stage for the zoo has required bringing new members of staff on board, as well as a few new appointed positions on the senior panel. One such position was awarded to Holly Jones, a well-educated new face, taking on the role as zoo curator, handling the daunting task of designing more and more interactive experiences for the guests, alongside a whole host of new habitats. That is where we jump back into the zoo today, continuing our journey into the Himalayas with our next build dedicated to the Himalayan bear. Let's go! And we are off with a brand new habitat, and this time we are picking up where we left off last week on the opposite side of the snow leopard habitat. We've got this wonderful sort of rectangle of land that I always plan to put either the bears or the red panda into. The Himalayan bear won out here, and I actually, all the way through, right up until the end, was kind of 50-50 between the Himalayan bear and the sloth bear. Going to reasons as to why we chose the Himalayan bear later on. Now we're going to start out today building ourselves a little pond, and we're going to have a nice little dive pool at the end. At this stage I kind of envisaged it being used by the Himalayan bear for fishing, so we're going to have like a tree come across the top of it which they can climb on. While the animations in game don't necessarily support it, I had sort of this picture in my head of them using it to sort of get in and out of the water with. Unfortunately, because it is a base game model, the climbing ability of the Himalayan bear is a little restricted, and it's a bit of a shame. It doesn't quite show it off in, let's just say, as well as it would have done if it was a newer model or a newer animal from a download pack. But it looks alright, it got there in the end, and the pool still gives them a nice little area to swim in, as well as obviously somewhere to get a drink. Once we've dug out our little pit here, we're going to get our water in just to check the level. I built in another one of those curved glass front display areas again. Really enjoying those. They work really well on the snow leopard and on the gharial habitat, so we're going to replicate them again over this side. Framed the pond out in concrete, and we're going to come back to that and decorate up a little bit later. It looks a little bit basic for now, but we will return. Moving on, we're going to jump down the other side of the habitat and start building our shelter. So this is very much like the snow leopard one, going to be built entirely out of breeze blocks, and I'm really liking how these blocks sort of give a realistic roughness to these buildings. We're going to pop a door in for the keepers to get in and out, and then we're going to jump onto the inside and start replicating up a little bit of a backstage area. Now I'm going to copy the same fences that I used for the snow leopards, and I've started to come along to this sort of method of thinking that we don't need to go too snazzy when it comes to the metal piping and mesh that make up a backstage. Just having the metal and the grey and the non-colourful nature of these backstages makes them look fairly realistic as it is. So we're going to keep this fairly simple. We're just going to, a bit like we did before, mould it around the habitat gate, and then give ourselves a little area for the bear to sleep. I'm also going to knock a little swimming pool in for them as well. Those visually astute of you will also notice that these poles are a little high. We do come back and resolve that later on. As I mentioned, we're going to pop in this swimming pool. I'm going to do that just by making a little hole in the floor using the template stamp tool, which I don't use very often because I find it a little bit too exact for my liking, but it really works for these sort of pools. And then I'm just going to line the inside of that with some concrete, build ourselves a little ramp down into it. Now the bears can use this, it's part of their traversable area. I've never actually seen them go in, but this would also really just be there for the times where the bears don't want to go outside or can't go outside. It just gives them a little somewhere to get a drink and somewhere to have a bit of a paddle. Again, in the mindset of keeping things nice and simple, we're going to separate off a little sleeping area that will allow the bears to be separated when the cleaners need to go in to clean the habitat. And then we're going to have some nice big sliding doors, so we're going to make a little rail for those, and then we're going to copy that idea and put that rail over the top of where the front entrance will also be. It was at this point I thought, how are we going to get the bears in here? So I'm going to make this mock animal entrance door on the back. That's kind of it doesn't work, but I think just adding these little things in, it tickles a part of my brain which I'm really into. So I'm going to try and include like these little animal doors as where I can. And then we're going to jump up to the roof. Never used this metal roofing before, did not realise it was flexicolour. Really happy when I found out. So we're going to make a nice little green metal roof just to kind of help it blend into the background a bit. And we're going to also pop a skylight in there so we get a good amount of light on the inside. There you can see me just adjusting the fence so it doesn't stick through the roof now. And we can make a start on the front door. So we're going to trim the entrance out with some metal piping and then also some metal girders just to give us a framework. You won't see it from the outside because we are going to cover the front of this building in some faux rocks. I'm going to do the age-old zoo effect of trying to make a faux hibernation cave, but we're going to do that with the faux rocks later on when we do the rest of the rock work. For now, we're just going to bridge up the front of the door and then we're going to make ourselves a door using these metal tubes. You'll notice I've used a lot of these LED connectors, I believe they are, on the top there just to hold the pipes to the wall. And then we're going to mirror that and make them into a little roller set and colour these the same colour as the metal. And they actually end up looking pretty good, pretty in line with like a couple of little metal wheels. And that would allow this giant door to be slid left and right. Design-wise for the door, we're going to go fairly, I guess, non-overly technical. So just a giant slab of metal with some bracing on it. I'm going to make that out of some corrugated iron. And then also use some metal bars just to add some detailing to it. Now, whilst we watch the door get created in the background there, I'd like to take this opportunity just to say if you found any value or entertainment in the video so far, don't forget to tippy tap the like button down below. And if you're not subscribed, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We're growing really quickly, really happy with how it's all going. I've got plenty of announcements coming for you, both in Planet Zoo and other games, and I absolutely can't wait for you guys to see what I've got in the work. It is going to mean that a couple of these videos are going to be a little bit slower coming out, but it will be worth it in the end, I promise. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of those videos when they finally drop down to you guys. Now, with that all done, we're going to pop in our staple electrical switch to open and close the door from outside. I'm just going to attach that to the walls using these little metal hooks, just rotated around and hooked in. Again, a little bit of detail where it counts, but we're not going to go crazy with it. Off camera, I also popped in a little bit of ventilation, and then we're just going to pop down a couple of enrichment items. Again, we're not really going to do too much in here, and the visitors can't see into this backstage, so this is really just between you and me, because the guests, they'll never see this. To finish up for safety wise, we're going to put this extra level of barrier just so you don't put your arm or hands through the mesh, and then we're going to have a nice yellow line just again to reinforce the point. With the shelter all done, we're going to move on outside, and the wonders of franchise means I get to build in the rain. And we're going to use the faux rocks that we used last week to make the edges of the path and start to bring that around our edging on the habitat. We're going to create these little peek-throughs, and we'll come back to them later and pop some interesting things for the guests to see through those enrichment items and planting. Before that, however, we're going to create our wonderful rocky landscape, and we're going to mirror, I guess, a little cliffside pool. I want this to have sort of jagged rocks that are going to stop the bears climbing over it, but it also is going to look fairly impressive once we've got it all planted up. Now, we're taking a little bit of a tactical risk with these rocks in that I had hoped, and you'll see it both on this section and the section to follow it, to have these nice big open plateaus of flat rock that the bears would clamber all over. We could have enrichment items on them and they'd walk on them nice and flat. Were this the sloth bear, then that may have happened. Unfortunately, with the Himalayan bear, base game animals have this really, there's no better way of saying it, a bad animation set and a bad ability to climb things. So unfortunately, it does mean that not a lot of this is usable, and I really liked how it turned out. So what you will see in the ending cinematics is the wooden log ramps, which I'm using to get on and off the rocks, are also ran across the inside of the rock. This allows the bears to then walk up it, and the game will then see it as a traversable area. One other consequence of these rocks was also that we were already on the edge of not being able to fit a sloth bear. Once we got the rocks in, there just wasn't enough room left in the habitat for them. So that does mean that we cannot have them. We're going to have the Himalayan bear It's a shame. I would have liked them, but the Himalayan Bear's alright, and they've got it in the name. They have the word Himalayan in the name, so, you know, kind of have to use them. They just have very scrunchy faces, as you'll see in the cinematics at the end there. All I'm doing now is just going around and popping in some statement trees, some enrichment items, and then we're just going to bed some of that rock into the ground a little bit more with some textures. Stop it all just being grass and flat. We're going to use some statement trees in the right areas, and what I mean by that is, for example, on the top of our mountain here, we're going to spend a good bit of time looking at it from different angles, from the angles the guests would see it, and just make sure that we've got a nice silhouette against that mountain. We're also going to make sure that we include some of the Himalayan birch that we've used there elsewhere in the habitat. We don't just want it to be a one tree and done. And the idea is that this habitat needs to look nice and lush and thick. Because it is a smaller habitat, we don't have too much room to spare. The way we're going to get around this is by using a couple of big statement trees, and then we're going to use things like the pea shrub and nettles and hosta just to bulk up little areas of green, that as you look in there's a lot of open space, but you don't really see it because your eye jumps from one to another vegetated area and you kind of don't register the bits in between. And I think it makes it look really nice. It's quite a good transition from this really heavy forested look that you would imagine would be further in to the completely barren and desolate area of the snow leopard habitat, which essentially would be behind the guest as they were viewing the bear here. The hosta is probably the MVP of this entire setup, purely because it's so 3D, it's so bulky, it's got a lot of shape. But I also enjoy bringing in things like the coastal pig face here, which its darker colour just adds a lot of shading to some of these rocks, and it's a nice little ground weed which I don't really use enough of, and I really need to use more of it, so that's probably going to be going into the favourites list. Now, to add a little pop of colour, we're going to bring in some of the foxgloves. Again, we don't want something too bright. We just want extra colours that are going to catch your eye, or if you see them you're like, oh, that's different. Same goes for the sagebush, which is not used anywhere else, but gives us that nice sagey, turquoisey blue green that really is very standing out against the rest of the green leaves. Oh boy, with the planting done, it's time to do some final little finishing, and we're going to start off just by roping, or should I say steel cabling, down our tree trunk. I was thinking as I looked at it that were the bear to use it, I don't think any responsible zoo would leave a tree just dangling out over a body of water without some sort of support, especially if they could push it down and use it to climb out of the barrier. So we're going to run some ropes across, colour them in a steel colour, use some LED caps to attach them and bolt them to the tree, and then these connectors to bolt them to the rock. And I think they worked out really well. I love these little details that probably nobody will ever see in the cinematics, but I know they're there and they look nice. And with that, we're pretty much finished. So let's jump on into the cinematics. So here we go. Oh, I love it. It turned out so well. This one actually didn't take very long to build, which was a shock. I expected it to take... Normally I spend like 5 to 8 hours building these. This took probably about 3. A lot of that was down to the fact that we already had the shape kind of set out by the pathway. And I drew this one out a few times before I decided on what I was going to build, and that really, really helped. So we're probably going to do that a little bit more, and I really like how it came together. It is a bit of a shame we couldn't get the sloth bear into this habitat. I don't think there's going to be space for it anywhere else, and I really do like them. As I said in the Eurasia Park, it was one of my favourite animals of that pack. But It's fine. The Himalayan Bear's alright, and I think it's nice to have a little bit of representation from the base game. The biggest thing I love about this habitat, however, is the angles and the sights and the feeling you get from the whole thing, especially in those sort of early morning, late evening lighting shots. Once the snow's on it, it feels very thematic. It feels very like there's a whole lot of ambience to it, and I really like how it turned out. Hopefully you did. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to give it a good old like, and don't forget to tip the subscribe button if you're not yet subscribed. I'm working on something pretty amazing for Planet Zoo and absolutely can't wait to show you all what that is. I hope you're going to love it. I love it. I love the idea of it. It's just taken a little bit longer than I possibly would like it to, but I think it's going to be worth the wait. That's it for today, however. I will see you next time. Goodbye.